They thought they knew exactly how your story would unfold. They had already imagined the moment you would finally lose your patience. One careless message. One unfair accusation. One more disappointment. Surely this time, you would react. But you didn't. You answered with something they never prepared for. Calm. Not the kind that comes from having an easy life. The kind that only appears after you've spent countless nights wrestling with questions no one else ever heard. And that changed everything. Because people know how to deal with anger. They know how to respond to arguments. They even know how to dismiss tears. But genuine peace. That confuses them. Have you ever noticed how some people become strangely interested in your life the moment you stop trying to convince them of anything? The moment you stop explaining. Stop defending. Stop chasing their approval. Their attention quietly shifts. Without saying a word, they begin watching. Not because you've become louder, but because your silence no longer looks like weakness. It looks like something they can't quite understand. And what most people never realize is that the calm they are watching today was built in places they were never invited to see. That's where this journey begins. Section 1. The quiet shift nobody saw coming. There is a moment in almost every difficult season that doesn't look important while it's happening. No applause. No breakthrough. No dramatic conversation that changes everything overnight. Just a quiet decision. A decision so small that, at first, even you barely notice it. Maybe it happens during an ordinary drive home. Maybe while staring at a phone that never lights up with the message you were hoping for. Or perhaps it's late at night, when the house is finally still, and the only sound left is your own breathing. That's when something inside begins to change. Not because the world suddenly becomes kinder, but because you're growing tired of carrying battles that never belong to you. Have you ever reached the point where proving yourself simply felt exhausting? Where every explanation seemed to create another misunderstanding? Where every attempt to be understood somehow left you feeling even more alone? Many people spend years believing peace comes after everyone finally understands them. But life has a surprising way of teaching a different lesson. Sometimes peace arrives long before agreement ever does. It arrives the day you stop measuring your worth by someone else's opinion. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean your heart becomes cold. It simply means you begin protecting something more valuable than your image. Your inner steadiness. At first, no one notices. People are busy expecting the old version of you. The one who answered every criticism. The one who felt responsible for fixing every uncomfortable silence. The one who carried emotional weight that was never theirs to carry. So they keep pushing familiar buttons, waiting for familiar reactions. But this time, nothing happens. Not because you've become emotionless. Because you've learned that not every invitation deserves your attention. And that's the moment the balance quietly begins to change. The people who once thought they could predict you now hesitate. They replay conversations in their minds. They wonder why their words no longer land the way they used to. They start looking a little closer. Not because you've become more visible, but because you've become less predictable. And what they still don't understand is that this calm wasn't born in comfort. It was shaped in places where no one was watching. Section 2. What they never saw you survive. People often believe they understand someone's strength because they can see the outcome. They rarely stop to imagine what it cost. They see the calm conversation, but not the hundreds of conversations you rehearsed in your head and chose never to have. They notice the steady smile, but not the mornings when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain no one else could see. They admire your patience, without realizing how many nights you wrestled with disappointment before patience became your only honest response. The truth is, real growth is usually invisible. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't ask for attention. It happens quietly, while life is still asking difficult questions. Perhaps that's why the strongest transformations are so easy to miss. From the outside, it looks as though nothing has changed. Inside, an entire landscape has been reshaped. Have you ever walked through a forest after a storm? At first glance, everything seems familiar. The same trees. The same path. The same silence. But look a little closer. The weakest branches are gone. The roots have settled deeper into the earth. The storm didn't create the strength. It revealed where the strength had been growing all along. People often work the same way. The hardest seasons don't magically make someone wise. They uncover lessons that comfort could never teach. Slowly, you stop needing every answer today. You become less interested in winning every disagreement. You discover that protecting your peace often matters more than protecting your pride. That kind of change is difficult for others to recognize, especially if they only knew the earlier version of you. So they keep expecting familiar reactions. They repeat old patterns. They test old boundaries, almost as if they are trying to prove that the person they once understood is still there. But every attempt leaves them with the same unexpected result. Calm. Not forced. Not performed. Simply chosen. And when someone can no longer predict your emotions, they begin paying attention in a completely different way. Because certainty has quietly turned into curiosity. But the most surprising part isn't that they are watching more closely. It's the reason they suddenly can't seem to look away. Section 3. The power of becoming unreadable. Most people don't pay close attention when they believe they already know your next move. Predictability makes them comfortable. If they know exactly how you'll respond, they don't have to question themselves. They don't have to reflect. They don't have to grow. Everything feels familiar. But something unexpected happens when you begin responding from peace instead of impulse. The pattern breaks. The words they once used to provoke you no longer have the same effect. The silence they hoped would make you anxious no longer pulls you into chasing answers. The distance they created, expecting you to run after them, somehow loses its power. And suddenly, they're the ones left wondering. Not because you've become mysterious on purpose, but because you've stopped living as a reaction to everyone else's behavior. Have you ever noticed how freeing it is when you no longer wake up wondering who approves of you? When someone else's mood no longer decides the direction of your day. It's not that life becomes easier. Challenges still arrive. Disappointments still sting. There are still moments when your heart wants to answer immediately. The difference is that you've learned to pause. And in that pause, you've discovered something many people spend years searching for. You don't have to attend every emotional battle you're invited into. Some conversations deserve your wisdom. Others only ask for your energy. Knowing the difference changes everything. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean just before sunrise. The waves never stop arriving. Some are gentle. Some crash with incredible force. Yet the horizon remains steady. It doesn't argue with the storm. It doesn't race against the tide. It simply stays where it belongs. Inner peace often works the same way. It isn't about controlling every wave. It's about refusing to let every wave carry you away. That quiet stability is difficult for others to understand. Especially for those who expected your emotions to remain easy to influence. Without meaning to, you've become harder to read. Not because you've built walls, but because you've built roots. And people can sense the difference, even if they can't explain it. That's why their attention keeps returning. Not to the person you used to be, but to the quiet strength they never expected to witness. And the next realization may be the most uncomfortable one of all, for them, and perhaps even for you. Section 4. When your peace holds up a mirror. There comes a point where your calm stops being just your own. It quietly becomes a mirror. Not a mirror that judges. A mirror that reveals. People often assume discomfort comes from what someone else says. But more often, it comes from what someone else's life quietly reflects back to us. When someone sees you no longer chasing every explanation, they may begin wondering why they are still chasing theirs. When they watch you walk away from unnecessary conflict, they may notice how much of their own energy is spent creating it. You don't have to point out the difference. Peace has a way of speaking without raising its voice. Have you ever walked into a room where one person remained calm while everyone else was arguing? Sooner or later, everyone becomes aware of that person. Not because they are demanding attention, because steadiness naturally stands out in the middle of chaos. The same thing happens in everyday life. Without realizing it, people begin comparing your response with their own. Not because you asked them to, because your quiet choices invite quiet questions. How are they staying so composed? What changed? What do they know that I don't? Sometimes those questions inspire growth. Sometimes they awaken resistance. Both are possible. Not everyone feels comfortable around someone who no longer reacts the way they expect. Your calm removes a pattern they had grown used to. And when an old pattern disappears, people are often forced to face something new. Sometimes that's hope. Sometimes it's uncertainty. Either way, the conversation has changed. The surprising part is that you didn't change it with clever words. You changed it by becoming someone who no longer needed to win every moment. That doesn't mean you'll never feel hurt again. It doesn't mean disappointment suddenly disappears. You're still human. There will still be days when criticism stings, when silence feels heavy, when unfairness tempts you to explain yourself one more time. But now, there's another voice within you. A quieter one. It gently asks, will this response bring peace, or simply continue the cycle? That single question has the power to change an entire day. Perhaps even an entire season of your life. Because every time you choose wisdom over impulse, you become a little more difficult for fear to control. And that's when something remarkable begins to happen. The people who were watching for your reaction start noticing your direction instead. Section 5. They're no longer watching your reactions. They're watching your direction. At first, they were waiting for a mistake. A moment of frustration. A single emotional crack that would prove nothing had really changed. But time has a way of answering questions that words never can. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. And the reaction they were expecting never arrives. Instead, something quieter begins to appear. Consistency. You keep showing up. You keep doing the work that nobody applauds. You continue treating people with respect, even when respect isn't returned. You stop measuring every day by who noticed you, and start measuring it by whether you remain true to the person you're becoming. That kind of consistency is difficult to ignore, because it cannot be faked for long. Anyone can appear peaceful for an afternoon. Anyone can sound wise during a single conversation. But remaining steady through changing seasons, that tells a different story. Think about a lighthouse standing along a rugged coastline. It doesn't chase the waves. It doesn't argue with the storm. It simply keeps shining, night after night. Not because the sea has become calm, but because its purpose was never to control the sea in the first place. Perhaps our lives are similar. Maybe strength isn't found in controlling every situation. Maybe it's found in remembering who you want to be, regardless of the situation. Have you ever looked back at a version of yourself from years ago and quietly smiled? Not because life became perfect, but because you realized you no longer carry every burden the same way. The things that once stole your sleep now become moments of reflection. The opinions that once defined your confidence now pass by like clouds across an open sky. That doesn't happen all at once. It happens through hundreds of small choices that almost no one else ever sees. Choosing patience when anger feels easier. Choosing understanding when pride demands the last word. Choosing to keep moving forward instead of proving a point. And little by little, your life begins speaking louder than your explanations ever could. The people around you notice. Some will feel inspired. Some will remain confused. Some may even keep waiting for you to become the person you used to be. But by now, something inside you understands an important truth. You don't owe your future to someone else's expectations. You only owe today your very best character. And once that truth settles into your heart, a strange kind of freedom begins to grow. The freedom to walk forward without constantly looking over your shoulder. The freedom to let your actions tell the story your words no longer need to defend. And perhaps, that quiet freedom was what you had been searching for all along. Because the greatest change was never that people started watching you. It was that you finally stopped living as though you were being watched. Section 6. The moment you stop performing. There is a freedom that arrives so quietly, you almost miss it. It doesn't come with applause. No one announces it. There isn't a single morning when you wake up and suddenly feel fearless. Instead, it arrives in ordinary moments. The message you choose not to send. The argument you no longer rehearse in your mind. The opinion you no longer feel responsible to change. At first, those choices seem small. almost insignificant. But over time, they begin to shape an entirely different life. Because every time you stop performing for acceptance, you make a little more room for authenticity. Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to carry a version of yourself that exists only to satisfy other people's expectations? It's like carrying a heavy coat long after winter has ended. You become so used to the weight that you forget what it feels like to move freely. Then one day, you finally set it down. Nothing around you changes immediately. The same streets, the same faces, the same responsibilities waiting for you tomorrow morning. Yet somehow, everything feels lighter. Not because your problems disappeared, because your identity is no longer tied to them. That is a quiet kind of strength. The kind that doesn't need recognition to remain real. Some people may still misunderstand you. Others may continue telling old stories about who they believe you are. Let them. People often speak from the last version of you they understood. But growth doesn't ask permission before it moves forward. Imagine a tree standing through every season of the year. In spring, it blooms. In summer, it offers shade. In autumn, it willingly lets go. In winter, it stands with bare branches, looking almost unchanged to those passing by. Yet beneath the surface, the roots never stop growing. Real transformation often looks exactly like that. The most important work happens where applause cannot reach. Perhaps that's why calm has become your quiet companion. Not because you've learned how to avoid every storm, but because you've learned that storms don't get the final word. And when people continue watching, hoping to find the old version of you, they discover someone who no longer needs to perform, prove, or persuade. Someone who has learned that peace is not something the world gives. It's something we choose to protect, one ordinary day at a time. Which leads to the final question. When the noise fades, and everyone else stops deciding who you should be, who will you choose to become? Ending, the quiet road ahead. Perhaps that's what this journey was never really about. Not becoming someone impossible to hurt. Not reaching a place where life never disappoints you again. And certainly not convincing everyone to finally understand you. Maybe the deeper purpose was much quieter. To discover that your greatest strength was never found in controlling other people's opinions. It was found in no longer allowing those opinions to control you. There will still be moments when life tests your patience. Unexpected criticism. Closed doors. Conversations that leave more questions than answers. Those moments aren't signs that you've failed. They are gentle reminders to return to the place you've been building all along. The place where your peace no longer depends on applause. Where your worth no longer rises and falls with someone's approval. Where your direction matters more than someone's opinion. If you've ever felt as though your quietness was being misunderstood. If you've ever wondered whether staying calm was making any difference. Perhaps the answer was never meant to arrive through louder recognition. Perhaps it was growing inside you, one unseen decision at a time. Because the strongest lives are rarely built in moments everyone celebrates. They are built in the ordinary choices no one else notices. The decision to respond with wisdom instead of impulse. The decision to let go instead of holding on to resentment. The decision to keep becoming the person you admire, even when no one is watching. Ironically, that's often when people begin to notice. Not because you're asking them to, but because quiet consistency has a presence that words can never imitate. So as you leave today, don't ask yourself who is watching your life. Ask a different question. Is the person I'm becoming someone I can respect when the room is empty? If this message spoke to something you've quietly carried for a long time, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What is one moment in your life when staying calm changed more than reacting ever could? Your story may become the encouragement someone else needs today. And if you choose to continue this journey with us, there will always be another conversation waiting, one that reminds you that lasting strength is rarely loud. It's steady, it's patient, and it keeps moving forward. Because somewhere beyond today's horizon, the sun rises exactly the same way it always has, not in a rush, not asking anyone for permission, but quietly filling the sky with light.